Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 7th and final session in Track 1, where we'll hear from Tamara Marnell from the Orbis Cascade Alliance about Open Source Archives West replacing a proprietary XML database with BaseX. My name is Michelle, and I'll be the conference committee member moderating this session. Before I hand things over to Tamara, I just want to quickly point out that we'll answer questions at the end of the session, but you can submit your questions at any point by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please use the chat for comments and courteous conversation, and use the Q&A for questions. And with that, I'll pass things on to Tamara.
Thank you, Michelle. So as she said, this presentation is about Open Source Archives West. I am the program manager for the systems program at the Orbis Cascade Alliance. If you're not one of us, we are 37, soon to be 38 institutions across Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. But Archives West is a website that spans farther than that. So I'll first give a little background information about this project. Archives West, it used to be called the Northwest Digital Archives, and it was operated out of Washington State University until 2007, when the Orbis Cascade Alliance took on the hosting. And it consists of 44,000, close to 45,000 now, finding aids from 6 Western states, so bigger than our core membership for the Alliance. And it includes Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming. The site uses a schema based off of EAD, encoded archival description, as defined by the Library of Congress. We're using our own version of EAD that is based off of the 2002 version with minor tweaks for our best practices in order to make everything run smoothly in our own repositories. We also use archival resource keys as persistent identifiers. These are like digital object identifiers. They're supposed to be persistent, and you can use a special format of a URL from the California digital libraries to access us without actually going through our website, though most people do use the archiveswest.orbiscascade.org domain. And all of the finding aids in our collections are released under either CC BY or CC 0 public domain dedication. That is up to the institution. When they join us, they can select which attribution they'd like to appear on the finding aids. So here is a screenshot of Archives West as it looks now. It is not very different from how it looked before we moved to open source BaseX. It was mostly a backend change, not a cosmetic change. So you'll see all of our states listed to get to things by repository, or you can do subject browsing to find related finding aids. For example, agriculture and natural resources. You open that, and the first, I think will be fisheries, and then you can see all of our finding aids related to fisheries. And here is an example of a full text keyword search for Native American tribes in Oregon. Just for an example, to show you that you will get the full text results over here, all of the finding aids, the 465 that match those terms. You will also see facets on the side. By repository, you see place here, but below this, if I were able to scroll, you would also see subjects and genre forms and names. That includes personal names, corporate names, and these are all taken from the control access headings within the finding aids. So I'm showing you what the front end looks like to give some context for what we needed BaseX to do. We needed it to be able to perform full text searches for all of our finding aids and also handle facet indexes like this. And it needed to do it quickly and not have a really draggy, laggy, out of date website. So here are some of the reasons that we undertook redeveloping this site again. And we started this project last summer. And it was prompted by a lot of things, but one of them was the Alliance Council writing the Commitment to Open Principles and Practices, which is a commitment for our organization to do our best to support open access or open anything as far as we can. This wasn't a promise that we are absolutely going to move to open source everything, but it was a commitment to trying our best. And this was within what we were capable of doing. Also, our proprietary XML database software that we were running the website off of for many, many years was quite expensive. And I think that is probably the number one reason that people start thinking about open source is they're spending a lot of money and they want to stop spending a lot of money. I will talk a little bit later at the end of this presentation about cost balancing there, because open source does have a cost in labor. But at least we're no longer paying that proprietary company $5,000 a year for this piece of software. Also, the servers required to run the proprietary software were very expensive. We had to be on an M4 extra large AWS instance, which cost us $500 a month, which is insane. And we could not just shut it off or just make it smaller because the software that we were using at the time used up 100% of the CPU that we had. So there was really no room. We either had to live with that and continue paying for those very large servers every month, or we had to throw it out and build using a different backend. And also, over 14 years since the Alliance took on Archives West, different developers had made a lot of additions without renovations. Like if you had a house that was built in 1950 and then every decade somebody made an addition, like a new west wing, a new east wing, a new attic, a new basement, and then you ended up with like core 1950s architecture on the inside and a west wing from the 60s and an attic from the 70s with like red wood paneling. That's what happens over time. And I'm not knocking any of the developers who contributed to Archives West. It just happens that way. If something exists for a long time and you have people coming in and out, we had a whole series of developers coming in. Somebody was developing something in Perl, and then somebody else didn't know Perl, so they put something there in Python, and then you've got like Perl calling Visual Basic things that are calling C# things, and it got really difficult to maintain. So it was time to raise it down and build a new building with a plan. And so now I'm going to talk about our experience actually building the website with BaseX. And first, I'll answer the question, what is BaseX? I've been saying the word a lot. It's an open source product. It's released under the Berkeley Standard Distribution License. And on its website, it says it's a lightweight, high performance and scalable XML database and an xQuery 3.1 processor with full support for the W3C update and full text extensions. So to translate that, it's a Java program. You can use the Open SDK, put that on your machine, put this program on your machine, and use it to build searchable databases out of XML files. So we've got our 45,000 EAD XML files over here. BaseX can ingest it, and then we can use that to do all the searching and the faceting that we need for the front end. xQuery is the programming language that's used to read, update, and full text search the databases. I was a complete newbie to xQuery when I took this project on. I didn't know what it was. Fortunately, it's a language that is in use by a lot of different programs. This isn't BaseX specific, so there's a lot of resources that you can use to learn about this standard. And BaseX just implements the standard. And XPath expressions are used to select nodes within xQuery. So if you have any familiarity with XSL transformations, like I had to take a course in that in library school, so at least I got that knowledge piece down. That is what is used to navigate through the document. And then the xQuery is for doing operations on it. BaseX uses a client-server architecture, and so if you haven't heard that term before, I think of it like you go to a restaurant as a client, and then you place an order with your server, and they bring out the food you requested. It's the same deal. You have one party that's the client that's asking for information. You have a different party that's the server that is sending that information. And this can be like two different machines. If you are hosting a website, for example, the server's on the website and the client is a user's browser. But in the case of BaseX, there are two different components on the same machine, which is similar to MySQL. If you've ever installed it on a web server, you have to install the MySQL server. It's actually running what you need it to run, and then you use a client to interact with it, and you tell it, build this table, get rid of this table, add to this table, change the values in this table. So there are multiple client types, not just the command line. Like if you took MySQL courses before, it's usually a statement, and that's the command line that you're usually interacting with. BaseX does have that, so you can put in direct commands telling it to create this database, drop this database, update, and so on. It also has a graphical user interface, which you can use if you're running your project off of a Windows machine, or just put it on your Windows machine to get familiar with the software. And then there are programming language clients, a wide range of them contributed by the community, and I used PHP specifically for this project. So here is a screenshot of the GUI, or the graphical user interface. And I just took a screenshot to show you what the components are. Don't look too closely at all of the letters and things, because this was just like my playing testing ground as I was making documentation and getting to know the product. So here is a folder of EAD3 documents that I got from the Library of Congress for my sandbox testing. They're not the real Archives West finding aids. But they are open source. I checked, I made sure with them before I went and published anything that had Library of Congress finding aids in them. The finding aids themselves are always public domain. The objects that they represent might not be, but you can do anything you want with the finding aids. So if you're ever making a tutorial for yourself or teaching a class, that's an excellent place to go. Just go steal all of their. It's not actually stealing because it's public domain. So here I have all of these, and I have placed it already in a database, and you can do that through menus up here. Here's an example of an XQuery file that I have saved. This is the editor panel, so I can make tweaks to this XQuery and then press this play button and see what the results are. And here is the results of this query. I was asking it to get all of the genre forms in these finding aids that contain the word print and order them by the count of how many there are and tell me which files they are. So that's what it did here. And then this info box looks really confusing right now, but it is actually, I think, the most useful box in this GUI, because it will tell you what you're doing wrong if you have some sort of error. I did spend a lot of time making errors in the beginning and not really understanding why, because you have to use the flower, the FLWOR structure, and I was unused to that, and I didn't know what you were allowed to do and what not. So this is a good playground to test. So you can put any old XQuery up here, or you can run files that contain them. There's also a command line option, so you can test out the different commands. Also, this window will tell you what it's doing. It will convert this XQuery into the commands. So you can see, oh, it is opening the EADs, and then it's, making maps and things. So sometimes if you want to do something in the GUI, like through a menu, you can do that. You can say, create a database from these files. Then you can look in this info window, and it will tell you the commands that it's actually using to create the database, and then you don't have to figure it out yourself. But you would not actually be using this GUI for a website, probably, unless you're running it off a Windows machine. But we specifically did not want to run it off of a Windows machine because an AWS Windows is much more expensive than Linux. It is proprietary, owned by Microsoft after all. So we are using the PHP client to manage the database. And here's an example. All of these functions are within the declaration of the class. So that's what the thises are about, this session execute. So this is an example of a command to create a database. And I'm telling it to create a database called EADs and then an ID number, and then place all of the files that are in this folder there. And then it does it, it makes it. Here's another example of defining a function to drop the database, to add a new document to the database, and then the indexing. So the indexing is actually the most important. And I will get into why in a couple of slides, but this is just showing you, you can just run the query, bind any external variables you need, send it over and execute it. So your code can be quite clean on this side if you're putting all of your X queries in files for BaseX. So importance of indexes. The performance of BaseX will depend on the efficiency of your index structures and your XQuery files. It is not the sort of program that you can just install and say, here, have my files, and it will run like magic. I mean, it will run. It probably won't run very well. I did not actually fully understand what an index was when I started this project. I had never thought about it. Like Ex Libris always said, we're re-indexing, and I went, oh no, not again, it's going to take forever. But it's actually really essential that they index things because they can't search millions of MARC records all at once. They have to, every time somebody performs a search, they're searching an index. So BaseX offers some built-in indexes that are standard. You know, they're indexing the attributes and the names of the nodes, and you can optionally add things like full text indexes. It will extract all of the tokens or the single word values within a document and put it in its own index for you to search. But the power of your project is really in building custom indexes as databases. So in production, your users should not be searching original document databases at all. They should be searching a text index if it's full text, or a subject index if they need a subject facet, because the original documents, opening every single one and searching through it is pretty slow. Also, it locks up a process. So if you have one database and somebody needs to add something to it, they're locking that database to add that thing. And so somebody who also wants to read from that database and actually get the finding aid and see it can't do that simultaneously. So it's good to separate those two. So just getting BaseX working with those documents like I showed in the GUI playground is just step one of your project. Here's an example of what a subjects index looks like. Again, this is using the Library of Congress examples, not the actual Archives West examples. So it's extracting all of the control access headings for this group of XML files, and it's putting the term here and where it appears, term where it appears. So if somebody clicks on the side facet for accidents 1920 to 1970, these three will appear in the results. Or conversely, and this is actually where it's really useful, if you have a full text results, you've got 1,000 full text results here, you want to know which facets are in there, you can search just this one index and it will say, oh, you went for PP 021034 accidents. So it can be used in various ways. And now I'm going to go quickly into the lessons learned from this project. This is I think the first talk of the day that's actually talking about open source rather than open access projects. But the lessons, I think, are the same whether you're implementing something open source or you're embarking on a project to do OER textbooks for your whole college. Free software has a cost. The Archives West rebuild took me half a year of devoting 70 to 90% of my daily work to developing this website. And it didn't stop when we went live. It wasn't like, okay, it's done. As soon as it went out into the world, the problem reports started coming in, and the things that I thought I had tested really thoroughly, I had not considered all situations. Now suddenly I had 1,000 people testing for me and reporting all these bugs that needed to be fixed. I had to make tweaks to the full text matching and how the results were scored. I didn't have those text indexes to begin with, and I saw how slow the site was behaving. Certain searches would take up to 40 seconds because it was trying to search all of the original documents. I had to implement that text index to get it down to 6 seconds. You know, it's something that it's still a little annoying, but we're not Google. It's the best we can do. And I had to do some batch jobs for optimizing indexes as well, because previously somebody uploaded it, it spins, because BaseX is doing its thing. I had to make it spin somewhere else so that they weren't just waiting forever to get a response. The free part was free to the Orbis Cascade Alliance, as in we're not paying a company anymore to run this software, but they are paying me. So I had to develop the skills, and it took me time that if we had hired somebody else who already knew everything, it probably would have cost less, but I was already budgeted for, so it seems free. But like Angelique was talking about this morning in her keynote, having a lot of time to sink into a project like this is kind of a luxury. It's a privilege that a lot of like normal people who have a different job can't fit it in. It was part of my job description from the beginning to be supporting Archives West, so it wasn't a huge sacrifice, and I was able to sink the time into it, but you have to consider this isn't something you put on the computer and you say go and it goes for you. You do have to spend a lot of time making it work well. So an organization could either pay for software like we were paying a company for years to run the software that Archives West was based on, or you can pay a person. Another lesson learned that I think everybody knows, because you've all been hearing all these great talks about open access. The success of an open source project really depends on the strength of its community, and that's both the creators, the developers of the thing that you're using, in this case BaseX, and other users. If you are doing everything in a vacuum, completely in a silo, it's a lot harder to get things done. And the implementation of BaseX for our project was really made possible by the existing community of people who were already using BaseX, and it already asked a lot of the questions that I needed to ask. So it has a very active listserv. You know, there's messages coming in daily. It's worldwide. The developers are actually in Germany. So there's people all over asking questions and answering questions for each other. It has extensive documentation. So I would not take on a project unless you had that body of documentation. Otherwise, your life is going to be a nightmare. There were a lot of community-made resources already available. Somebody had kindly written a BaseX for Dummies in 2014 that got me started. It just walked through, how are you supposed to make this work? Because I couldn't figure it out by myself from the documentation, which is excellent and extensive, but also overwhelming if you don't know enough to know how to read it. And the development team is also very responsive to reported issues. I actually found a bug a couple of weeks ago and reported it. And the very next day they said, thank you, we fixed it, here's a patch. And I was able to get it into production pretty quickly. So those are the things I would look for if you're considering implementing any kind of open source software. Does it have a community you can tap into? And are the developers active and responsive? So I think I have 6 minutes left for questions. And Evan asks, did the proprietary database software also have a cost in labor and expertise for the Alliance? It did have an initial cost as people set it up. The people back in 2017 through about 2011 were actively developing it. So yes, we were both paying for the proprietary software and paying for not only regular employees, but contractors in other states to develop this. After that, it kind of ceased development. We were without an IT manager for several years. And so it just was kind of in a stasis state at that point. And the cost became that nobody was actually there to maintain it. So we were sacrificing the quality of the product just by having it sit there and relying on this external program. It's not like they were actually making the thing for us.
Sounds like a really exciting project. What do you feel like was the most fun part of what you got to learn in working on this project, and then maybe the least fun or most challenging?
So getting started was actually the most challenging because I didn't know anything. And I think whenever you start a skill that you have no familiarity with, it's getting over that hurdle of jargon. When people are telling you you see these resources that are supposed to be really basic and you can't even understand what they're trying to tell you is a basic, that can get really frustrating. So getting over that initial hurdle was a little bit painful. I actually avoided starting the project for so long. I kept pushing it out because I'm like, oh, this will be good if we do it, but it's so hard. But then once I got going, it was really fun learning XQuery. Once I got over the initial, like, none of this makes sense because it's a functional programming language and I'm used to doing object-oriented programming. And I was so lost with the for, let, where, like, what are you supposed to put where? But once I got it going, I saw the power of it. Like, I could get whatever information I wanted out of these 45,000 documents within seconds. Somebody asks me for a list of all their finding aids, here you are. Somebody wants to know all the collection numbers, there you are. And it was so much easier than trying to dig through the old Archives West and use the proprietary software that they had, which also seemed to have a proprietary language. It didn't use XQuery. I tried to get information out of it. It was like it stole it and locked it in a box and wouldn't let me open it. So it was, once everything was set up, it was really liberating.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Well, I think, oh, let me check.
I see two more. So Evan asks, are there any examples of large EAD indexes? Do you know what databases they use? So I do not know of any off the top of my head, but I know Maya Anderson at the Alliance does. So if you asked her, she would be able to know. she would answer that email probably without even having to look at anything. And then Devin says, I know the Alliance has been talking about NAFAN, the National Finding Aid Network. Do they have any plans for software, and was that a consideration when you were building this? So we considered that was happening and decided to go forward because it's probably going to be a few years, and we were not just going to hobble along using the same old product that wasn't working well for us for that long, on the hopes that California was going to build this amazing thing. So I have not heard what software they decided to use or if they're doing homegrown. I have heard that they are concentrating on getting basic minimal information because they're trying to incorporate a lot of repositories that might not even have EAD. They might have finding aids as PDFs on a website. So they have to be able to accommodate that. They do have a Slack channel that I think anybody can join, and I sit on it. I don't actually participate in it much, but I go and I see what's going on there. So you can join that and see what the progress is, what people are talking about. And Maya is actually here, and she says several other aggregators use the same proprietary solution that we did, which was Ixiasoft TEXTML. Heads up though, they haven't actually updated the product since about 2013. It's the same thing. And when there was that Java weakness a few months back that everybody was panic because hackers could get in and destroy everything. That weakness was in there and they hadn't taken it out. I think they did address it though, but it is pretty old. And Evan put the link to the NAFAN Confluence in the chat so people can read more about that.
Well, it looks like we're at time at 4:10. Thank you so much, Tamara, for this really interesting presentation. It was definitely had some new things for me to take away and investigate. And so thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope everyone will join us for the closing comments on the other stream, which I will put the link in the chat.